Councillors, we are now live on YouTube.
Good evening and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's council meeting. I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind all participants that to ensure the audio for the meetings is as clear as possible, all microphones should be muted as a default setting to keep background noise to a minimum. Any councillor who wishes to speak, please raise your hand via the virtual raised hand. We will follow the usual convention of first asking group leaders if they or their allotted colleague wish to speak on an item. When you are asked to speak by the Mayor, please unmute your microphone by clicking on the microphone symbol on the bottom left of the screen. Once you have spoken, please remute your microphone again. In respect of voting on items that appear to be uncontentious, I will ask for any councillor to put their virtual hand up if they wish to vote against or abstain. If no one signals, the vote will be taken as carried without the need for a roll call. If a minority signal they wish to vote against or abstain, they will be asked to confirm which, and as long as there's a majority in favour, the vote will be carried without a full roll call. When a roll call is needed, councillors' names will be called out by Mrs. Tambini. In respect of motions, please submit any proposed amendments to motions during the meeting via the chat function to the monitoring officer, Sanjit, me, and the Chief Executive. Please also confirm your seconder. Amendments will then be shared to the meeting via PowerPoint for a couple of minutes and will be posted in the chat for your reference during the debate. If anyone wishes to raise a point of order, please do this via the chat function if you can. However, if you are not seen, please inform me. I would now like to move to the first item on the agenda. So I'd like to introduce the Reverend Victoria Ramsey to lead us in a moment of reflection.
Thank you. My name is Tors Ramsey and I'm a Church of England priest and I work for the diocese here in Nottinghamshire.
You're on mute. She got cut off. Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Sorry, wouldn't mind starting again? You went on mute and then disappeared.
I'm so sorry.
Right.
I think that's an internet issue. I was just introducing myself. I just wonder, have you ever opened thick curtains that keep the light out and been dazzled by sunlight coming through your windows? My son was born in June, which is the time of year when there's most daylight, and so we invested in a thick blackout blind and then went about taping up any cracks around the blind that let the sun in. He was a really light sleeper and we wanted to keep the light out. But after his sleep in the afternoon, I would roll up the blind and suddenly the room would be filled with bright sunlight and he and I would rub our eyes until they adjusted to the light. Well, we're now in the season of Advent as marked by the Christian Church. And one of the themes of Advent is the anticipation of the light of the world in the form of Jesus Christ coming into the world. In the Old Testament book of Isaiah, the prophet says, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." Probably more than any other time in my lifetime, it feels like we are a people worldwide that are walking in darkness. The pandemic has disrupted and affected all of our lives in so many different ways. And entering the gloom of the winter months has made this second phase of lockdown particularly hard. In the Christian tradition, there's an acknowledgement of the darkness. Without God, there is darkness. God is the bringer of light, and in this text, his light dawns over a dark land. And so one of our traditions in this country is to bring in that light at the beginning of Advent, or for some sooner, I can see. I love walking and driving around at this time of year and seeing the magnificent displays of lights that people put up inside and outside their houses. Although the festive lights decorating our houses and our gardens and town centres are simply a form of decoration displayed by people of all faiths and none, sense of hope. I've noticed that the Christmas lights have appeared earlier this year in my village, an attempt maybe for people to pierce that sense of darkness with small rays of hope contained in the twinkling lights. For many in our communities, the darkness is very real. Many this year will struggle to pay their bills, to see their loved ones, to celebrate fully. And looking into the new year for some will bring anxiety and stress, a sense of uncertainty and fear. I'm aware of the important decisions that are taken by councils like this one across our county. And my hope and prayer for your meeting tonight is that in your conversations and decisions, you will contribute to that peeling back of the darkness and the instilling of hope for the people of Rushcliffe that you serve. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Mrs. Tambini to report any apologies, please.
We have had apologies from Councillor Jeffreys, Councillor Sims and Councillor Gray.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest, please? I can't see any hands up. So the first item is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 24th of September 2020. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we accept those minutes, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Eddie Veen.
Yes, I'd like to second the acceptance of the minutes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any councillors wishing to object or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that is carried. My announcements. Well, at least you haven't had to come out in the appalling rain that we have today, so you're all in the comfort of your own homes, or most of us. There have been a few events for me to attend since September. So I attended the Broxtowe Borough Council online civic service with tea and cakes, which were a very high standard since I provided them in my own home. Councillor Richard Mallender and I went to see the new glass recycling bins on the Hook in Lady Bay. A very moving moment was the tree planting for remembrance in West Bridgeford Park on the 7th of November. And then again, there was a service of remembrance at All Hallows Church in Lady Bay, where I, like many of you, and thank you very much for all of you who laid a wreath on my behalf and the council's behalf. And this year, as you are aware, the wreaths were made in all natural materials with a local florist, with a donation to the British Legion as well. On Armistice Day, I attended the service on the embankment at the War Memorial and laid a wreath there to represent Rushcliffe Borough Council. And I went to the online Notts Wildlife Trust AGM and to my surprise became a vice president along with 16 other people. On the 28th of November, it was the Christmas lights switch on, and the weather was slightly better than last year, so I was able to cycle there. And so that was a really lovely event. And this week, as I'm sure you know, it's the Celebrating Rushcliffe Awards. So there's already been 2 evenings of presentations, and the last one is tomorrow evening. This council meeting has just disrupted the others. And I've just been choosing a design for the civic Christmas card. And the design is one from Lady Bay Primary School. So I've just chosen that design and just been being filmed doing that. Lady Bay School have also provided a Christmas song. Instead of us being in the council chamber and the children standing around the Christmas tree, we have one that's been put out on social media. It's been pre-recorded, and so that again is Lady Bay Primary School. And hopefully there's going to be an outdoor carol singing event later, as well as some more online songs from Lady Bay. And I've arranged this afternoon that St Giles Church in West Bridgford, they are having an online 9 lessons and carol service, which will become our civic carol service. So I'd like to encourage people to attend that. It's online, so anyone can attend. That is on the 20th of December at 7:30. More details to come. And I can't believe I did this last time, but at the last meeting, I actually missed out saying one of the most important things that has ever happened. Because 2 days before that, my first grandchild, Elodie, was born on the 22nd of September to my daughter Lizzie and her fiance Theo. We still haven't seen Elodie because Lizzie and Theo and Elodie live in Basel in Switzerland, but we are hoping to see them over Christmas. So I think I must have been in shock at the last meeting. So that might explain a lot of things. Okay, I'll pass over to the leaders' announcements.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and congratulations belated for becoming a grandmother. I believe also Councillor Cotty also became a grandfather and made national press. So congratulations to you both. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for introducing the announcements. My first one I'd just like to cover is on business grants, and I'd just like to pay tribute to our officers for the incredible work they have done to get the grants out to businesses, as many of you know are absolutely desperate at the moment. We've actually moved over to about £27 million, so it's been a fantastic tribute to them. I know Peter Linfield's on the call, so I'd like him to take back, I'm sure, thanks of all our members for the huge amount of work they've done, and it really has been appreciated by many businesses out there. I've actually written to staff there, and I passed on the thanks of this council and the fantastic reputation that they actually have. As the Mayor mentioned, this week it is the Celebrating Rushcliffe Awards, with the final award evening tomorrow night. Again, I'd just like to thank everybody that's put that together, and particularly Jeanette and Ed Palmer, who did a fantastic job. What a challenge to put something like that online. I think it's been a terrific effort, and I certainly would like to congratulate all the nominations and all the winners of that event. And let's really hope that next year we can bring everyone back into a live showcase event that I think is something which we all look forward to in the council. I'd just like to touch on the COVID-19 pandemic at the moment. Next week, we have agreed with the NHS that we're going to host a test and trace facility at the arena. So we're very pleased that we can offer that facility. It will be a huge contribution to getting rid of this pandemic. And I'm delighted that we'll be live next week. So you may actually see that. In fact, a lot of it's gone up already. And I say that will be live from next week onwards for the next 3 months. While we're talking about the pandemic, there is some good news. Rushcliffe figures have now gone below 100, the overall rate. So that is very, very good news, and it's going in the right direction. Obviously, whether we move down from tier 3 to tier 2 is a different question, because that also takes into account things like the rates with over 65s, which is going the right way, and of course hospital admissions, which I do understand is still quite serious. But we certainly keep our fingers crossed that we are moving in the right direction, and I really hope you join me in absolutely making sure we get the message out there to keep people safe, adhere to the tiers, and let's really hope that, as I say, we can move out of tier 3 as soon as possible. Lastly, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to offer yourself and all members of this council a very, very happy Christmas, and thank you for the fantastic work everybody of all parties does in their wards. And I think it's an incredible job that the council does. And a very Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have no chief executives announcements, is that correct? And there are no citizens' questions. So we move on to item 8, which is the agenda item about the Development Corporation. And again, Councillor Robinson, could you move, please?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just apologise for my backdrop showing D2 enter AGM. It's actually stuck on my Zoom backdrop at the moment, so I wasn't going to try technically to remove that. The AGM was this week, which is quite pertinent when we talked about the Development Corporation. What I would like to do, Madam Mayor, is just have 2 sections to this item. The first one is really reviewing the up-to-date, to bring members, as I say, up to date on the Development Corporation, and secondly, just to outline then the recommendations to move this forward. Before I do, I just ask members, there is actually a correction. If you look on page 22, section 13 on the recommendations, it's actually showing 300k. It should actually be 500k, which represents the main recommendation. So there's no difference in the recommendations. It's just a typo error on that final page there. So just to refresh members' memories, the Development Corporation a number of years ago was discussed and to put in place. Now, the ambition of the Development Corporation is set out on page 13, 4.3, and you'll see that. Just bear in mind, I'm just going to that now, as I've got it on my screen there. So you will see that the ambition of the East Midlands Development Corporation is to supercharge a new era of growth for the regional economy by enabling projects which build directly on the potential of HS2, the region's status as a major trade and logistics gateway, and its historic strengths in research and development and industrial innovation, particularly research and innovation related to the emerging low carbon economy. Now, as you know, this goes across three main sites of the airport, Toton, and most important for Rushcliffe is the power station. The power station will be decommissioned by the latest of 2025. So this really offers the borough huge potential to be a national leader in a zero carbon economy as we go forward. We also the ambitions to create over 19,000 jobs, which with the news we've all heard this week on job losses, it cannot be more critical than to get this project on the way. There's been negotiations over the last few months with the government to ensure that the business plan for the Development Corporation is put together. They'll be submitted in March 2021. And we're also looking at, the government are looking at, is how really the public sector can really work with the private sector. So that business plan will include the case for change, value for money, and the very, very important outcomes such as jobs and the infrastructure that we can actually around it. It's important to note, Madam Mayor, that the Development Corporation will require legislation. As we move forward to that, because obviously parliamentary time is going to take quite a long time, but eventually with the Development Corporation, with the legislation, that will come with all its powers. So there's ongoing dialogue with the government with a view of really just looking how we can establish the pathway for the development of the corporation. In July 2020, the Secretary of State confirmed support to set up an interim vehicle prior to the creation of the main statutory body. So moving forward, I seek support of the full council as set out in the recommendations. And the main one obviously is being set up the interim vehicle from January 2021. If you could just observe page 16, section 4.19, you will see there the role of the interim vehicle, which I won't go through them all, but examples is raising finance, acquiring land, delivering their infrastructure, and selling the service land, agreements and negotiations. So it's quite a far-reaching but very, very important function of the interim vehicle that's going to be required to take this forward. In terms of funding, we'll look at funding for the interim vehicle over the next 3 years. This will go towards setting up a program team, master planning application work, and obviously working around the business case there as well. So to deliver the aforementioned, I want to propose to this council the recommendations which are laid out on page 11, section 2. If you'd just like to go to that. So first of all, Madam Chairman, there, if I look at recommendation A, it's really noting the progress, as I mentioned, about the Development Corporation. B is approving in principle the financial contribution to support the interim vehicle over the next 3 years to the sum of £500,000. But this is subject to match funding from other affected local authorities and government. The funding arrangements to be included within the medium-term financial strategy for 21-22 onwards, and funding will be allocated over the course of the 3 years. I just stress there that it is subject to match funding from the other authorities such as Nottinghamshire County Council, Broxtowe and North West Leicestershire there as well. The recommendation C is approved in principle entering into the members agreement and participate in the incorporation of the interim vehicle by guaranteeing delegates authority to the leader and the chief exec for agreeing in final form the members agreement and articles of association. And lastly, it agrees the nomination of the leader of the council as a proposed director of the interim vehicle. So in summary, Madam Mayor, I think this is absolutely vital to this authority. It is the most strategic and the most important site we have anywhere in the borough for the reasons I've gone through. And I ask for support and propose the recommendations that I've just gone through on page 11, section 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edivine to second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Robinson says, this is an incredibly important recommendation and brings enormous opportunity for Rushcliffe as it comes to fruition, as we hope it will. I'd therefore like to second the recommendation and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. So now we'll discuss this matter. So we'll start with Councillor Jen Walker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Labour Group notes the progress made to date of the East Midlands Development Corporation programme and the establishment of the interim vehicle. We understand the need for this council to make a contribution to support the interim vehicle over the next 3 years to the sum of £500,000. We also recognise the need to enter into a members' agreement and approve the appointment from this council to a director of the interim vehicle. However, much of what is said is being asked of us tonight is a leap of faith. It requires trust and a sense that what we're going to be creating at Rushcliffe-on-Soar is being done for the benefits of the residents of Rushcliffe. Whatever decisions are made should factor in jobs, skilled jobs, as well as public health, well-being, and the environment. What we're being asked to vote on is vague, and this has been pointed out repeatedly by councillors of all political persuasions. There's no mention of the proposed incinerator already at Planning and County. In fact, it's conspicuous by its absence in this document. Let us be completely clear that bringing in plastic and waste for burning into our borough is not zero carbon.
Mayor, could I have a point of order, please, Councillor Malley? The power to waste, the emerge, is nothing to do with the Development Corporation whatsoever. So it shouldn't be discussed. It's nothing to do with what we're discussing now with this item. So I ask that that is struck off and it's not discussed at all.
I was referring to the zero on the, in the.
You're talking about the incinerator. You actually mentioned the incinerator, which is not part of the Development Corporation, and you've been told that many, many times before.
Is this acceptable that I can be interrupted like this?
No.
Just
Well, it was a point of order, but carry on. You've finished about the incinerator now, haven't you? So you can
There's
carry
a
on.
little bit more about it being worse than landfill and actually emitting quite a lot more carbon.
Okay.
But okay, I'll go on to next thing.
Sorry.
But we must be, okay, so what we're being asked to do is to trust that some fundamental pieces of the puzzle will fall into place, such as one, that HS2 will go ahead as planned. Unfortunately, a recent report says the possible termination of HS2 at East Midland Parkway puts a major component of this project in jeopardy. My second point was to do with the talk of the zero in the document, which feels a little bit gimmicky and does feel like we're trying to kind of attract something and not being completely honest and clear, which kind of proves my point, and open and transparent. 3, that this Tory administration will financially back a green industrial revolution, but this government has already made 14 U-turns within the first year, so placing our trust in them is an extremely risky strategy to make with local taxpayers' money. So yes, the Labour group will be backing this vote for the formation of the interim vehicle, as having a seat at the table would favour the alternative. However, I come back to trust. We're investing much trust in Councillor Robinson with this vote. We know that he'll fight hard to attract business to Rushcliffe, but this decision is larger than that. This is an opportunity to create a sustainable future for this site, and sustainability is environmental as well as economic. We're trusting that he'll understand the importance of the decision made over the next few years and what kind of legacy those decisions will leave to future generations. Generations of people who want to live and work in healthy towns and villages in this borough. With this vote, we are expecting him to lobby his party at Parliament to reconsider their current position of subsidising industries that do more damage to the environment and public health. We're also putting our faith in the fact that he will make public and environmental health a priority at Radcliffe-on-Soar, by ensuring a full commitment to the actual green energy solutions going forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Major will speak for the Liberal Democrats on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Liberal Democrat group is happy to support this recommendation. The redevelopment of the Radcliffe-on-Soar power station site has been on the table for some time, and we certainly don't want to lose momentum on turning around what is a very significant landmark in our borough. Ensuring there is an holistic approach to the development is critical in securing the further investment required to move the project forward, and we recognise that this will take some investment from the council up front. However, we are concerned that the funds are being diverted away from the climate change reserve to do this. And while we can see that the £200,000 from that is earmarked for the National Centre for Integrated Zero Carbon Futures, which is proposed on the site, given that that proposal is still very much in its inception and the funding structure is yet to be finalised, we would ask that alternative sources for this amount are explored further before a final commitment is made to use that fund. We certainly do not want to end up with a great white elephant on the A453 as the gateway to Nottingham, and this interim vehicle seems to be the logical approach to keep things on course. It will also serve, hopefully, to bring together local authorities in support of a cohesive plan for the site, which can only be of benefit to all those involved. We look forward to being kept informed of progress over the coming months. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think that the council is right to be ambitious about its plans for the power station site and indeed the Development Corporation as a whole. And we're right to be seeking, housing, employment, and an outcome that's a benefit for the whole of Rushcliffe Borough. The Green Group does have concerns about some of the proposals that are included in this document. We're particularly concerned also about the use of the money for the carbon neutral fund. If there's a carbon neutral fund, then it should be using for a carbon neutral ends. Some of the proposals that have been put forward for the site, such as the incinerator, and some of the others, are not carbon neutral, and bringing in waste from as far afield as North London certainly isn't carbon neutral. I've also got concerns about the use of the neighbouring areas as a part of a wider free port, which, if people have a look on the internet, will see brings its own concerns. Free ports need to be properly policed, and generally around the world they are not. And we do not necessarily want to end up with a international blot as part of the Rushcliffe area. I'm also particularly concerned about the note of a 24-hour dedicated air freight hub. Now, at the moment, I don't believe we have 24-hour air access into East Midlands Airport. If we do have 24-hour flights, going to be turning in over villages in Rushcliffe, certainly turning in over West Bridgeford, as they do at the moment. We hear them very, very loudly in Lady Bay. If we're going to be having 24-hour flights going to East Midlands Airport as a consequence of this development corporation going ahead, then we should think very, very carefully about that and say absolutely no to 24-hour overflights of Rushcliffe, because that would be hugely to the detriment and the well-being of the people that we all represent. It is right that we should go forward at this stage, though, and be very, very careful in the scrutiny that we put onto this development corporation. With only one member of this council representing there, however esteemed, it is going to be very, very difficult to put up a case to fight for the people of Rushcliffe and make sure that the outcome for the whole of Rushcliffe is to our benefit and to the benefit of the people who elect us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no comment to make, and we support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, you wish to speak?
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Mayor. I'm really astounded to hear some of the comments that have been made about this proposal. It is a fantastic proposal for investment into the East Midlands. It'll play a vital part in raising the profile of the East Midlands. It's well known that the East Midlands is way behind other regions when it comes to investment, and this will contribute to that much needed investment back into the East Midlands. To just talk about Ratcliffe-on-Soar, this is more than just about Ratcliffe-on-Soar. This is about the Development Corporation as a whole. And to listen to some of the comments, we seem to be condemning it before it's even gone on trial. Vagueness doesn't come into it. Things need to be planned ahead. It's in its infancy. It's just about to get started. And so we should be fully supporting this and backing it, because this is going to bring jobs and prosperity to the East Midlands, and Rushcliffe is going to be right at the forefront of it. And to question trust, well, I certainly trust the leader to really be forceful and robust and really fight not just on Rushcliffe's behalf, but on East Midlands' behalf. So I'm fully supportive and fully behind it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor R. Walker, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Fully support the development of the Ratcliffe Power Station that delivers high quality and high tech jobs rather than housing or large warehouses which deliver fewer jobs. The Development Corporation plans represent an opportunity to deliver the kind of positive change that would simply not be possible without such a structure. We can't do it on our own, I understand that, but this doesn't necessarily mean, though, that we, and by that I refer to the people of Ratcliffe-on-Soar and surrounding parishes, can't be included genuinely in the process at every level of decision making. The report to this item states that community engagement and consultation shall be enshrined from the outset. I wish to record at this stage that the preparation of a statement of community involvement and following statutory consultation processes should not be the limits of our aspirations in this regard. This should be the last occasion on which proposals for governance arrangements for the Development Corporation come forward without specific detail on how the voices of the people who will be most impacted by the development will be heard.
Thank you. Councillor Edivine. Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. I've just noticed Councillor Gowland has a hand up. Sorry, I missed you. I don't want to miss you again, Councillor Gowland. So Councillor Gowland and then Councillor Edivine, unless anyone else wishes to speak.
I don't want to be particularly critical. I do appreciate these things are difficult, but it is true to say that the most detailed aspect of this proposal, I think, is the proposal for the 24-hour dedicated air freight hub, which hardly seems like a particularly green move to me. The stuff around the environment does seem really quite vague, and I do understand that it's difficult, but you know, words like development of market-ready zero-emissions technologies, and I said this in previous discussions about this, it would be good to have some really solid suggestions there, much more solid, more like the 24-hour air freight hub, which I really think would be a disaster for Rushcliffe. We don't need that, neither do we need the incinerator. This is like turning the whole thing into a bit of a mess, not the green future that we all want. So I really want this to be successful, but I think we do need to see more details, and I strongly support the previous comments as well.
Thank you. Now is Councillor Edivine, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You actually didn't have to point out that I didn't unmute myself earlier. So the word leap of faith has been mentioned. This is a start of a process, and really we have to take that leap of faith. And we have to also remember that this is privately owned land at Radcliffe-on-Soar, and it therefore is something that we are trying to do to persuade the owners of that current site to fully participate in the development corporation. And it's important that we get that moving forward, because otherwise they'll go off and do whatever they do. It's their land. And I think part of what I would say is part of that leap of faith is that anyone who's seen any of the presentations from on the Development Corporation, which have been given to councillors, it does stress that all of our local universities are involved in this zero carbon futures site that they are proposing. And so I do believe that the right people are around the table actually making sure that this is going to deliver. With regard to East Midlands Airport, because as Councillor Clark quite rightly said, it's much wider than just the power station site. East Midlands Airport actually does have currently, it is the only airport in the UK, I believe, or major airport in the UK that is allowed 24-hour flying. And it does actually currently have 24-hour flying. But I think there obviously has to be some future in changing the way that aviation happens. And at the moment, that is a pipe dream of, you know, developing hydrogen fuel cells, whatever. But it's quite clear in today's environment that aviation can't be the same in 10, 15, 20 years' time as it is today. And therefore, it is a leap of faith. And I, for one, think the importance of this development is worth taking that leap of faith. And I certainly would like to see this recommendation carried forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. I've just noticed that Councillor Gaunt apparently has no hand-raising function. If it's okay with everyone else, because I don't want to have what happened last time. As long as you're saying something very short, Councillor Gaunt, please go ahead and have your say, please.
Hi, yeah. Sorry, I don't know where the hand gesture thing is, so I apologise. I just wanted to say just one little thing. When this was first announced at the beginning of this talk, it was announced as a discussion, and Councillor Walker just raised a few concerns that I just wanted to clarify. The Labour Party group are fully in favour of going forward with this. We said that at the start, and the speech was very clear about that. All she did was raise a few concerns which the public in our area are genuinely concerned about. So it was a requirement to be discussed at this stage. It's no personal attack or anything on what's happening. We support what's happening. Just wanted to raise some concerns. It isn't just focused on Ratcliffe-on-Soar. She also raised concerns about Towton and the fact that there is discussions or rumours already of HS2 not going there. And there is a problem with that, because a fundamental aspect of this is that we're putting £500,000 forward that needs to be match funded. And if one of those boroughs isn't matching it, does that mean we're not going forward? There are things that do need to be brought up in discussion, and all it was done was calmly and politely asked to discuss that. That's all. So that's all that was. So we are in favour, as said previously. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, your right of reply, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Gordon, for clarifying it, because I actually don't think anyone was quite sure what your stance was on this. As I think we've heard speakers say, this is an incredible opportunity for this borough, and it's a once in a lifetime. We talk about levelling up, we talk about the environment, we talk about jobs, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about communication. This ticks the boxes, and it is absolutely vital. For me, this is not about a leap of faith. This is a process. This is why it's been brought to this full council, to set up the interim vehicle. And it's the interim vehicle which is going to be driving it. Now, of course, there's representation through the leader, but can I just stress to councillors, we also have a member working group, which I chair, which I go back to, which has all the debate. They're always briefed. Any major developments will have to come to council and to cabinet as well. So we have the scrutiny groups. So I'm very confident we have the infrastructure within this authority to make sure that our interests are being served well on the development council. Corporation with it. I did stress, and just need clarifying this, the Emerge project is nothing to do with Development Corporation at all, hence why the point of order was called, and it really needs to be stressed with this. This is a private landowner, nothing to do with Development Corporation, who's put an application in, and I stress this hasn't been heard at the county council, who will be deciding it, so it is in progress, but it's nothing to do with Development Corporation or this funding or the interim vehicle. It could have been in Attenborough, it could have been anywhere in this borough. An application like this should have come in. So it is completely irrelevant. And I want to pay tribute to Uniper, who own this site, because I can absolutely say from day one, they've been very cooperative. If you look around the country at the amount of derelict power stations that just sit there for years and years and years and nothing happens, Uniper have got ambitions. And the biggest danger with this site is that this council's talking about it in 10 years' time. We've got the biggest mess and dereliction there ever. And this is why it's so important to back this interim vehicle so that we're shaping the future and that we are going to deliver the very, very key projects and the jobs and the levelling up that this borough needs. There's been talk about HS2. There will be announcements coming out in the next week or so or the next couple of weeks about HS2 with the National Infrastructure Council. That's what you're talking about, these rumours. It's them that have put this out. And of course, we will respond to it. I absolutely, totally agree. I agree, Councillor Walker, you mentioned about this. I totally agree. And this will come back to either Cabinet and full council with any changes in that. This is a 3-year project we're looking at. So the money will actually drip in over 3 years. So there are safeguards with that. So I think that's also very important. I think that's everything. Oh, sorry, there was just about stakeholders, and I thank Councillor Edivin. This is the first project I've ever worked in as a councillor where every stakeholder has been round the table. The universities have played an absolutely key part. All the local authorities, the LEP, the government, the MPs, business, everybody has played a very, very, very key part in shaping this. I've also noted Councillor Rex Walker's comments about the locality, and it's something I will be taking to this interim vehicle. It is really important, and I agree with the engagement in parish councils and community groups around there, because ultimately this is where it's going to have the biggest impact. But I do ask members, let's just bear in mind the bigger picture here. This is a huge opportunity for us, and I do ask for that backing. And I think that, as I say, with the amount of scrutiny we have on this council, I don't think it's a leap of faith at all. I think it's a very, very, very pertinent and pragmatic step to go forward the interim vehicle for this authority. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Are there any councillors wishing to object or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that motion is carried. So we come to item 9, which is the revised Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025. Councillor Inglis, please, to move.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Fellow councillors. Right, this report brings to the council the recommendation to approve changes to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Hackney Carriages and Private Hire Licensing Vehicles Policy 2020 to 2025, which is already a comprehensive document. Rushcliffe Borough Council is responsible for the regulation of the Hackney carriage and private hire trades within its borough. Hackney carriages, private hire vehicles and their drivers play a vital role in enabling people to travel around our borough and beyond. It is a visible role that portrays the image of Rushcliffe to all, with clearly displayed vehicle plates and driver's badges bearing the Rushcliffe Council's name and emblem, so therefore they're ambassadors to our borough. It is a legal requirement for the council to have such a policy and to allow it to be reviewed in order to comply with changes in legislation. The Department of Transport has released a statutory update, the Statutory Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Standards July 2020 within the Policing and Crime Act, section 171, 15 and 4, which the government is expecting all councils to adopt and confirm to be in place by January 2021, or to a justified explanation why it is not. I cannot see any reason why this should not gain full support this evening. The proposals have been scrutinised and endorsed by the Licence Committee in October, and positive feedback has been received from consultation exercise in November this year. These updates are not changes for the sake of changing. They are specific to ensure enhanced protection to the safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults, to ensure strong safety standards and enrich professionalism within the trade. Yes, there will be implications for drivers, for new procedures and operators to adopt, but it's considered unlikely that it will reduce the number of vehicles of any significance. I'm not going to itemise every amendment as they're highlighted in red in the draft policy that you all have attached to the agenda. I consider they're all necessary, sound and fully justified. I would, however, draw your attention to sections 9.3, 9.4 and 9.5, which are the significant additions to the policy that now put an onus or additional onus on the operator to maintain live records of their call takers and dispatches and to the deployment of ex-offenders. This is to ensure their position is not abused by those seeking to exploit children and vulnerable adults. So now detailed records of every booking must be completed, which will form a cross-reference should a need to trace a passenger be necessary. The second part of the report is to grant permission for the executive manager to be granted delegated authority to make minor variations to the policy. This allows the document to be dynamic and ensure minor amendments can be done expediently. So therefore I make the recommendations that parts A and B of the report are approved so the council can conform to the government's deadline and the new legislation is in place in the Rushcliffe policy to continue the safeguarding of its residents. There's no alternative option. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan to second, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Inglis has emphasised, the changes proposed here form an essential strengthening of the safeguarding measures in the private hire industry, do not simply represent change for change's sake. Neither should they be exceptionally onerous on drivers and operators beyond what is absolutely necessary to protect vulnerable adults and children and to ensure the highest levels of vehicle safety. Licensed drivers are in a position of trust and must be and remain a fit and proper person to hold that licence. I'm pleased to see that a new harm test has been added to the criteria for assessing the suitability of applicants, along with a strengthened policy with regard to the employment of ex-offenders in any role they may have in determining which drivers can carry vulnerable passengers. I would also like to emphasise and welcome the inclusion of additional safeguarding requirements and enhanced safety checks in respect of operators and dispatchers, and the need for live detailed records of passenger journeys to be maintained. There are also now enhanced protection for whistleblowers to report issues in confidence to licensing officers. Amendments to this policy also broaden out the type of vehicles that can be licensed to include adapted vehicles such as stretch limousines that stalwart of the school prom, but with sensible limits on the numbers of passengers that such vehicles can carry. As Councillor Inglis has said, it is a very comprehensive document. It's a policy that will be kept under review and modified as necessary. Safety and the safeguarding of passengers using private hire vehicles in the borough of Rushcliffe will be significantly enhanced by these proposed changes, and I'm therefore very happy to second the recommendation to approve the policy and to grant appropriate delegated authority to the Executive Director for Neighbourhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jen Walker, please.
Councillor Begum is going to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening all. I'd just like to say that the Labour Group recognises the importance of this document and the amendments that it has made in terms of protecting people and the safety standards. It's also, so we are encouraging it, and thank you very much for all the that it's been highlighted and sort of amended. The only thing that I would say is that the Appendix 6.3 mentions about electric vehicles and the discouragement. So maybe something that we can consider. But obviously now that it's going to be passed, you know, it might not be done now, but it's something that should be in the document really.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We appreciate that this is a sensible, if complex, policy, and much of the changes are being required by the legislation, which is obviously increasing the checks and safeguards. So we will be supporting the motions. We do have some comments. I'm really pleased at the second part of the recommendation that the officer will have opportunity to make minor amendments, and the one that I would particularly focus on is about air pollution and emissions. We don't want Rushcliffe to be any dirtier than necessary, and at paragraph 7.3 the document requires Euro 4 as a minimum, but also that no vehicle should be older than 12 years. Euro 5 came in 2009, so by the time this policy is issued and distributed, it will be 2021, 12 years from Euro 5. So I would hope that the officer and that Councillor English will support the officer in amending that to improve the recognition of Euro 5. I had a few other queries. I mean, in 7.7, which has been referred to, it refers to specialised vehicles used for school proms, constructed or adapted for less than 8 persons. That seemed a rather open-ended. I mean, it conjured up quad bikes with trailers, motorised sleighs, and carnival floats. It just felt a bit open. And my last point really is requiring record keeping to be made of every log, to log every detail of every call. And I'm just wondering if council officers do random checks on those records, and also whether the DBS checks, which the company are required to do, are checked as having been made. But with those other points, we're happy to support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Richard Mallender, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, happy to support the recommendations. The remarks that the councillors have made about electric vehicles, I think those are things that have been raised in licensing committee meetings when we've discussed the policy before, and no doubt they will come up again. Obviously, I think everyone agrees that we need to have cleaner, lower emission vehicles, and as our neighbours over the Trent have gone for that, then it would seem to be a sensible way to go. But in terms of the amendments that we're making this evening, I think these are wholly sensible, and happy to support them.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to thank everyone concerned for the detailed work undertaken to update this policy, which is very necessary to protect the public, and we support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see anyone else's hand up. There isn't anyone who can't put their hand up. Do they want to wave? Not that I can see everybody. I don't think so. So in that case, Councillor Inglis to have right of reply, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll pick up on a couple of points that have been raised, especially with emissions, the Euro 5. Yes, it's something we all want to see put in place as soon as we can, Councillor James, and thank you for raising it. The problem is it's still a fine balance between the driver being able to afford a change of vehicles. It is an expensive change. Especially in view of the sort of COVID-19 has had on the industry this year, especially Hackney carriages. I mean, their vehicles cost a fortune, but there is a limited amount of Euro 5 compliant vehicles that's available to them at the moment. The previous policy was due for review in 2022, which the previous one was looking to look at the review for that in 2022. But if this policy is adopted, it's not set in stone. It will be regularly reviewed. And the Euro 5 is part of that consideration. It's the intention of the borough to have a joint standard across the conurbations, so we need the other boroughs on board with that as well. The problem is now, if we introduce that now, we'll probably find some of the drivers will move across to other boroughs with less stringent conditions. As you say, if we do pass the motion for the executive manager to be able to make those minor changes, that is something that can be done when the time is right. I know Councillor Beagle mentioned the electric vehicles, as did Councillor Malinder, but that will fall under the overall plan. We are looking to update the taxi fleet under the carbon management plan. You raised about DBS checks. That is very relevant. Each taxi driver will need to produce a DBS check on his application. The new policy will put the onus on that driver updating to any criminal activity, whether they've been arrested or charged or released on bail, rather than waiting for the update from the courts. The contract drivers who are currently driving with like the vulnerable adults, like taking the children to school and back on the contract runs, they have to provide an extended DBS check. And they are subject to further vetting from the county and city councils in order to do that contract. I think records were mentioned as well. Taxi records are open for examination. I know our two officers, Peter Harris and Dave Roberts, who are excellent ambassadors for us, very knowledgeable, very keen, very proactive. They do go around checking tax license records, as can any police officer. So, you know, I think the checks are in place for all those. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are councillors who wish to object or abstain, then will you, are there any councillors wishing to object or to abstain from the vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating desire to object or abstain, then that motion is carried. So item 10 is a notice of motion, and this is a notice of motion submitted under standing order number 12, and it's to be put to the council by Councillor Gaunt and seconded by Councillor Jen Walker. So Councillor Gaunt, will you move the motion, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've written several versions of this speech, one which was as aggressive and partisan as the one that was delivered with such vitriol by Councillors Robinson and Brennan in the last full council meeting, but I've settled on a version that I think attempts to reach out and find common ground over an issue which is very serious for local government and needs to be discussed in a grown-up way, in a manner which fits the expectations of the residents of Rushcliffe. The situation's dire. By 2020, local authorities will have faced a reduction to core funding from the government of nearly £16 billion over the preceding decade from 2010. That means that councils will have lost 60 pence out of every pound the government had provided to spend on local services in the last 8 years. Next year, 168 councils will receive no revenue support grant at all. According to local government's own finance publication, councils have innovated, reimagined and changed the ways that they work to deliver significant savings and efficiencies. For this, our officers should certainly be praised, but there's only so much that they can do in the face of large reductions in government funding, increasing demand for their services, and without the local discretion to do things differently. In spite of all the best efforts of local government, the reality of what £16 billion of funding reduction and increasing inflation are having a negative impact, and residents are starting to see the consequences of these cuts. Increasing demand means council budgets are having to go further than ever before. On average, more than 500 child protection investigations were started each day in 2016-17, increasing from 200 a decade ago. Between 2012 and 2016, the number of homeless households supported by local authorities grew almost 11 times faster than the total population. Across England's local roads, there's a £9 billion backlog in pounds of pothole repairs. The adult social care provider market continues to be squeezed. Updated analysis indicates a £1.4 billion pre-existing pressure because reductions to council fundings mean that some councils have been forced to keep the prices of care they commission below a sustainable level in order to protect their most vulnerable residents. The Competition and Markets Authority has come to a similar conclusion. This pressure is simply to sustain the care market in its current state. It doesn't cover the cost of supporting residents whose social care needs are currently not met. According to previous funding gap analysis, in just 1 year between 2016-17 and 2017-18, councils had to absorb a funding shortfall of £2.4 billion. This means that as well as the pressures on adult and children's social care, other council services will have also received unavoidable reductions. Councils now spend less on early intervention support. Support for the voluntary sector has been reduced, rural bus services have been scaled back, libraries have been closed, and other services have also taken a hit. In the face of these increasing pressures, councils have been forced to draw on their financial reserves. This has also forced local councils to make risky investments. Some, like Rushcliffe, are in a slightly better position with many comparatively wealthier council taxpayers in their boroughs and plenty of greenbelt land to open up for housing. But others are trapped inside their authority boundaries and are forced to look elsewhere for investment. This leads me to the motion at the last council, which was used with such zeal to attack Nottingham City Council. I'm asking everyone, please, to stop comparing Rushcliffe with the City of Nottingham. The biggest cost to local government are adult social care, education and children's social care. Nottingham City Council has a responsibility for all three of these departments, whilst trying to provide services to some of the most historically deprived areas in the country. Rushcliffe doesn't. 50% of the residents of Rushcliffe commute to work in the city and use the services provided by the city. We need to start working together in a spirit of communal support rather than hostility and the bitter political point scoring of the last council meeting. We should be proud of the hard work of the officers here at the borough for their amazing work of balancing the budget. Councillor Moore is always quick to point out the brilliant work of the Conservatives in keeping reserves for hard times. Of course, that's prudent, but we need to ask at what cost. A large percentage of the money that has allowed us to balance the budget during the last 10 years has been through the soon-to-disappear new homes bonus. This has incentivised the building of housing in the borough. We've literally balanced the books in large part by releasing greenbelt land and drowning Rushcliffe communities under unsustainable levels of housing. I'm not sure the people of Eastleigh or Redcliffe or Ruddington would be particularly happy to discover that fact. Instead, it's time to use our position as councillors to call for a return to better levels of funding so that we can provide the services that our residents expect without having to resort to deciding whether a municipal golf course is a luxury that the people of Rushcliffe can afford. COVID-19 has proved beyond doubt that over-centralisation of power and money is ineffective. The government has wasted hundreds of millions of pounds on failed mass procurement, failed test and trace, and another whole myriad of other disasters. We've only recently looked to successful local council examples, such as the one led by Liverpool of test and trace. So it's time to take back control of things at local level. So I ask us, please, to pass this motion so that we can rebuild our fantastic local democracy and, to quote Boris Johnson, build back better. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Jen Walker to second, please.
I can't imagine anyone not voting in favour of increased funding, so I'm going to reserve my right to speak, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Robinson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I've just come off screen a second. No, thank you for that and for this motion. And I think it would be, as Councillor Walker actually said, it would be ludicrous to reject a motion which requires more funding. And at Rushcliffe, we're always very keen to have more funding coming in. Obviously, a lot of this motion has been about the last 10 years, so, and Councillor Gaunt's very good at quoting figures. I'll quote some figures back on this. I'm sure we can play tennis with this as long as he wants to. But over the this year, this government will put in over £10 billion extra into local government to cover the cost of COVID-19. And this actually is absolutely in line with the LGA's recommendations for local government. For those who don't know, the LGA represents councils. There is over £10 billion has gone on there, with an extra £1 billion going to social care and a £1.55 billion ring-fenced for further grants. Perhaps they should have also recognised in terms of Rushcliffe, and I appreciate your comments about officers and the wonderful work this Conservative administration's done to keep Rushcliffe essential services with no cuts at all going in there, is that, as I say, with additional grants, we've had over £27 million worth of grants have come into Rushcliffe to help us with the pandemic. And I stress to all members that we haven't cut services and neither have to get debt. I'm sorry about the comparisons with the City Council. I'm sure as a taxpayer in the city, you'd be delighted that £64 million has gone to an energy company that made absolutely no difference. But there we go, let's leave that to one side, and I'm sure that we can discuss that at another time, and maybe we can also discuss maybe Croydon as another Labour council which went to fix its finances that lost just over £10 million on the leisure centre, over budget by the way, over £10 million over budget on the leisure centre. So they went up going bust 2 weeks ago with debt over 1.5 billion, which really brings me to an issue here, is that while I absolutely agree with the motion in terms of its intention, there are a number of issues with it. And number one is, A, nowhere does it mention Rushcliffe. So you're doing a motion that basically to give all councils, irrespective of how well they're run, irrespective they can go and waste so much money wherever they choose on their own ideology projects, but no, the hand comes out, please give us more money because we need it. And as I say, the motion doesn't mention Rushcliffe anywhere at all. So let me emphasise with the Councillor Gaunt, Councillor Walker, we absolutely agree with your intentions of the motion going forward, but we'd just like to propose an amendment. If we could show the amendment now, please.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Robinson, please?
Yes, I've Councillor Edvin, thank you, Madam Mayor. So really, we'll forget all the preamble at the start, but this council calls for review of funding from central government to support the true cost of the COVID-19 pandemic, and appropriate and fairer funding will ensure that well-run official councils such as Rushcliffe are able to pay for essential services in their communities. So let me stress there, this amendment reflects the motion, and what we're here today is about Rushcliffe. It's not about the worldwide of local government. It's about Rushcliffe. And it also emphasising the government should work with well-run and official councils for the appropriate and fairer funding. And where people have not got the right governance in place, they're prepared to waste taxpayers' money on ideologically driven projects, they should somebody should be addressing that like they are currently at the city with the inspection going on there, and like at Croydon, like at Bristol. So, Madam Mayor, I put this amendment forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edivine, is that correct for the seconder?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to second the amendment, please, and reserve the right to speak.
Okay. So we're now discussing the amendment. Who would like to speak first? I can go to, sorry. Okay. All right, Councillor Clark. I can't see Councillor Clark's hand.
Sorry.
Councillor Clark.
Madam Mayor, I raised my hand. I assume that you were asking the other groups to speak. Is that not the case?
It is the case, yes.
So I'm happy to speak after the other groups.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, do you wish to speak on the amendment, please? Or Councillor Gaunt? It's an amendment to Councillor Gaunt's motion, but Councillor Walker is representing the leadership of the Labour Party this evening. So whichever of you.
Sorry, I have to wait for the Councillor Walker's sound to be.
Oh. Yes. You're on mute, Councillor Gaunt.
I've fallen foul to that. I've taken the mickey out of so many people over that. Right. No, we have to accept the amendment, even though there are bits. I mean, obviously the way it's presented, I don't really appreciate, but I totally understand. We could argue for hours about facts and figures and go forward and backwards, left, right, and centre, arguing. I don't think the people of the borough want us to do that. So I could say no, I don't accept it. We could argue, and then in an hour's time, you all vote for the amendment, because that's what will happen anyway. So we have to accept the amendments. I don't know if that nullifies the discussion or whether you speak on it or whether we just go to the vote. It's up to you guys, because yeah.
We'll just check the other opposition leaders might wish to make a comment, but then we'll go to a vote on the amendment without further discussion. And we'll ask Councillor Clark whether he still wants to speak, given what you've just said. Thank you. So, Councillor Jones, do you wish to make any comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I really do wish that Simon Robinson did not have to make petty points. It was clear that the original motion was from Rushcliffe because it's been debated in Rushcliffe and it obviously concerns Rushcliffe. So to put words in that are self-congratulatory to this borough, valid or not, sort of slightly undermines the point, which is that this is about all local authorities, in particular ours. We've obviously heard the amount of central government money that's come in, but we also know the comments about how hard our finance staff have worked at putting grants out. And we know with the extreme burden of funding the leisure centres to ensure their survival, which is likely to be of a continuing concern until way into next year. So although it's inevitable we'll be supporting the amended motion, I do not like at all this self-congratulation and by the implication that all Conservative councils are competent and well run and never in debt, because clearly some of them are. But no less we will be supporting the motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The amendment, yeah. Councillor Richard Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we move to the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had a motion at the last meeting about commercialisation of council income streams, and one at the March meeting calling for increased council funding. All three motions are party politically motivated, and we really have got better things to do with our time than sit here listening to the two largest parties sniping at each other. This council has got a job of work to do for our residents, and we work best when we work together. I would like to propose, please, that we move on to the next business. And Councillor Shaw will second.
Councillor Mallender did actually move to the vote. I was just giving you an opportunity to speak. So
I will second.
Would you like to second Councillor Mallender's move to a vote? So, yeah, are you seconding the move to the vote? Sorry.
I will second that, but I'm hoping that we will move to the next item of business on the agenda rather than go through all these hoops on completely nonsensical party political motions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the amendment has been put forward, has been accepted, and so we'll move straight to a vote on that amendment, and then that will become the motion. So, are there any councillors who wish to object or abstain from the vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. So Councillor Clark and Councillor Thomas, are you objecting or abstaining?
I'm abstaining, Madam Mayor.
You're abstaining. Okay. So the amendment is carried. With just one abstention, and the right of Councillor Edevine, you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I suggest I thought we'd actually gone to the vote, so I wasn't intending to say anything.
This is on the motion.
The amendment.
The motion has been, that was on the amendment.
Yeah.
So this would be on the motion.
But the amendment has been proposed that we move to the vote on the amendment.
Okay. All right then. So, okay, so we've amended the motion, but that becomes the new motion. So now we have Councillor Robinson, who is right of reply.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say, Madam Mayor, I'll never apologise for self-appreciating this council, Councillor Jones. I never will, and I think it's really important all councillors should do that and show it in its greatest light. And as I say, I won't ever apologise for doing that. We've reacted to the motion from the Labour Party, be it as it is like that. As I say, we would never disagree with more funding. So for me, move on to the vote now. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gowland.
I know we want to move to the vote, but I do think we have to recognise that different councils have different pressures. Different councils on both sides have gone bankrupt. We have to realise that, you know, we are quite lucky in Rushcliffe, and we should be grateful for that.
Thank you. We're moving to a vote on the amended motion. So if everyone could switch off their raised hand until that is announced. So, are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this amended motion? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, would it be in order for us to have the amended motion shared on the screen while
Can we do that, please?
Thank you.
Is that possible? Would you like me to read it out? Councillor Mallender? I'll read it out. This council called I'll read out the second paragraph, sorry. This council calls for a review in funding from central government, sorry, I can't see everything, to support the true cost of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, sorry, okay, I can see it now. An increase in funding will ensure that councils are able to pay for essential services in their communities. No, sorry, there isn't one in the chat then. Right. This council calls for. Okay, sorry, I can't read part of the screen. That's my problem. So we've got to appropriate and fairer funding will ensure that well-run and efficient councils such as Rushcliffe are able to pay for essential services in their communities. So, are there any councillors wishing to object or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. So we have Councillor Thomas again. Is that an abstention again?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So that amended motion is carried and with one abstention. Thank you. So we now come to questions from councillors, item 12. So the first one is from Councillor Gowland, please.
Yeah, I won't. I'll withdraw that question.
Oh, you're withdrawing that question.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thanks.
I've got a note about that. I do beg your pardon. That was it. Oh yes, Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Various agencies are consulted on individual planning applications with regard to infrastructure such as roads, drainage and sewerage. How does the Council's Planning Committee and Planning Department ensure that consideration is given to the cumulative effect of multiple new developments in proximity to each other and to existing settlements? Thank you.
Councillor Upton, would you like to reply, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as you say, Councillor Thomas, individual planning approvals in proximity to each other may have a cumulative effect on the capacity of existing infrastructure, such as roads and drainage. But this is why we have our local development plan, which takes this into account at the strategic level at its early development stage. Now, all applications, including those submitted outside our adopted local plan framework, such as some, for instance, in your East Leek ward, are carefully considered by our planning officers, including consultations with the various agencies in relation to any cumulative effect on the infrastructure in the area. And as I've said before, on many occasions, Severn Trent Water cannot refuse a connection to their foul sewers, and they are obliged by law to ensure adequate capacity. So to summarise, understand the point you're making, but we do carefully consider what any cumulative effect would be of individual planning applications in a particular area with the various agencies. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Thomas, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
As you have no supplementary question, that concludes the business for this evening. Thank you very much for attending, and I'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a happy and safe